Um, Today we're starting with Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Yes. Part of the story of the journey of the Israelites through the wilderness. It's going to take us on kind of this realm, into this realm of sacrifices, ancient rituals, by Israel's priests, and it's going to be, kind of a world that's a little different from ours, just a little bit, but it's going to have some familiar elements that you might recognize, things like, love your neighbor as yourself, Leviticus 19. Rabbi Hillel was a very prominent rabbi that kind of helped shape a bunch of the what they call halakha within the Talmud. And he was asked one time, or challenged, I should say, to teach the whole law on one foot. He did it. He did it by saying, whatever is hateful to you, you should not do to your neighbor. I'm done. That's the law. Yep. So, and then of course in Deuteronomy 6, you get the Shema, which means to hear. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your strength. Numbers 6:24 gives you the Aaronic blessing. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you. So you see where all these things start to kind of come from. Leviticus is, of course, set at Mount Sinai, and the theme is holiness. Numbers will continue the journey through the desert to the edge of the Promised Land, where there's lots of rebellion and rebirth. And then Deuteronomy is kind of a farewell sermon from Moses, that is summoning the people back to devotion to God. You get this, there's this new generation because, the old generation is gone, so it's renewing the covenant with the new generation as they prepare to go into the Promised Land. So Leviticus, as I'm sure you probably noticed, Leviticus has the name Levi in it, so the tribe of Levi. So it is for the Levitical priests, that is the tribe of Levi, or is the priestly tribe. It's going to be primarily instructions for them about cleanliness as far as clean and unclean foods, sexual relationships, skin diseases. But the main focus is holiness with kind of that, with holiness with the sacred and how that comes to be in the first 10 chapters, dealing with all the sacrifices, all the burnt offerings, birds, grain offerings, peace offerings, well-being, burning parts of an animal, specific parts for well-being and that kind of stuff. Concentrates on how a sacrifice should be made, what a priest should do at the altar. The question, of course, that might arise would be, why? What is all this? Why is this important? Why do this? And the answer is, we don't know. We get no explanation as to why things are done in a particular way, why God wanted them a particular way. Leviticus is primarily, telling us how sacrifices are to be offered for the forgiveness of sins, but he doesn't explain why sacrifice is linked to forgiveness, why those two things go hand in hand. I have my own personal theories, but that's, I honestly think it's what the pagan world did, for one thing. When they wanted God to do something, or their gods to do something, you gave them stuff. So this was kind of, they were going to be doing it anyway, and I think God's learned at this point that there are some things you just don't fight. And you're like, okay, well, if you're going to do it, here's how you do it. That's my personal philosophy, mainly because once we get to Jesus, we find out God forgives anyway. He doesn't need sacrifices. Jesus goes around, heals people, and says, "You're forgiven. You know, go on your way, sin no more." So that always has, for me, kind of raised the question of, well, if Jesus can forgive without all the sacrifice and all that kind of stuff, what is the sacrifice about? What is it for? So my own personal theory is that it shows up with Cain and Abel, and God does not actually ask for it. They just do it, because I think it was probably just part of what you did. This was, your deity was angry with you, or you wanted your deity to do something for you. Give them something. That was the mentality. If you make them happy by giving them things that they like, then they'll do what you want them to do. And of course, Leviticus 13 outlines the Day of Atonement. That's kind of the big one. Yom Kippur. You probably have heard of that in your Jewish circle friends. Yom Kippur. Yom means day. Kippur is atone.
16 in my book.
Is it 16?
Atonement is 16.
Okay.
Infectious disease.
Must have written it down wrong.
The rose book I have, it has sacrifices, priesthood, clean and unclean, days of
Mhm.
atonement, and laws.
Yep, nope, you're correct. It's on 16. I must have just written it down wrong. Okay. Basically, the Day of Atonement kind of went like this. Let me get this out of the way. Remember, you have your tabernacle. It's kind of the big, part of it. Then you have this smaller part within here. Here you had your altar. You had your bronze laver where you did all your washing. Then you had your table of showbread and your menorah, the big curtain, the Holy of Holies, and then the ark was in here, and then the incense. So the Day of Atonement. Aaron was the high priest. Aaron was the only one, of course, allowed inside the Holy of Holies. And this is the one day of the year where you went into the Holy of Holies if you weren't Moses. So what Aaron does is in the morning he gets up, does not put on all of his priestly garb, just dresses normal, goes in, offers a sacrifice for his family, and then he goes in and sprinkles the blood 7 times around the ark. Then he comes out and he puts on his all of his priestly garb, then does the same thing. And this time it's for all of Israel. So he makes the sacrifice for all of the Israelites. Does the same thing, comes in here, sprinkles the blood around on the Ark of the Covenant 7 times, and then comes back out. And then he takes a goat, and he puts all of the sins on the goat, and then sends the goat out of the encampment. Guess what that goat is called? The scapegoat. That's where you get that fun term. When someone's a scapegoat, they're taking the blame. Because the idea being they take all the sin, all the blame for the year, and you send it outside the encampment, but of course it'll get killed or whatever. But the idea being you kind of got a clean slate now for the next year until the next Day of Atonement. So, oops.
Tell them about the rope.
Which rope?
The rope that they have in the highest place. They tie a rope around.
Oh, yeah.
In case he dies in there, you can't can't go in there, so they have
Yeah.
pull them out.
Yeah, you gotta have the rope, so, because you can't, nobody else can go in, so if he goes in and God kills him, gotta yank him out.
Of the whole tabernacle.
Oh, there you go.
If anybody wants to look at it.
Yep. Let's see. All right. Of course, why are these sacrifices necessary? The author simply tells us it's the divine order of things. Again, the idea of it being a gift. It's how we show our tangible desire for forgiveness. Prophets, of course, are going to later critique the practice of sacrifices, because what people started doing was, well, I've done my sacrifice, so I'm good until the next sacrifice, so I can do whatever I want in between. When we find out God actually prefers things like mercy and justice, not sacrifice. So this whole notion of holiness kind of doesn't necessarily fit our modern world, but it's worth asking what it means for the sacred to take on a tangible form and ritual acts of giving. What does it mean to make a sacrifice in your giving, and that kind of stuff, when it is combined with, of course, the life that God wants you living. So your giving, your sacrifice isn't all God desires. God desires you keep his covenant. You do the things he wants you doing. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on Leviticus, just because you're welcome to read through it if you want to. Yeah, there's some interesting stuff. Well, there's some interesting stuff in Numbers too, quite frankly. And Numbers is a census, actually, of the people, hence why it's called Numbers, to find out the number of the people. Number of those who came out of Egypt. The second census is at the end, lists those who were not born in Egypt, but those who were born in the desert that will enter the promised land. So it kind of takes us through the death of one generation, the birth of a new one. So kind of the theme is rebellion and birth, of the rebellion of the Israelites, and then sort of the rebirth of the new generation going into the promised land. So starts very positive, has real military strength behind it, where you begin, it's the arrangement of the tribal camps. And of course, Levi is not counted with all the others. You find that in the end of chapter 1, because they're the priests. So they aren't, because it has to do with allotment of land and all that stuff. The Levites will not get land. So that's part of that. But yeah, it starts out very positive. It starts out with them being, really strong, ready to go. Because remember, they at this juncture, they're still ready to just go straight into the promised land. They're thinking, all right, here we go. The one I'm going to stop on just for 1 second, though, is one that is just one of the most atrocious tests that exist in the book of Numbers. The test for an unfaithful wife. It's in Numbers 5. Yeah, you've read that before? I like to highlight it because it just shows you how just horrible some of these things are. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Speak to the Israelites," it's verse 11, "and say to them, if a man's wife goes astray and is unfaithful to him by sleeping with another man, and this is hidden from her husband, and her impurity is undetected, since there are no witnesses against her, and she has not been caught in the act, and if feelings of jealousy come over her husband, and he suspects his wife, and she is impure, or if he is jealous and suspects her, even though she is not impure, then he is to take his wife to the priest. He must also take an offering of 1/10 of an ephah of barley flour on her behalf. He must not pour oil on it or put incense on it, because it is a grain offering for jealousy, a reminder offering to draw attention to guilt. The priest shall bring her and have her stand before the Lord. Then he shall take some holy water in a clay jar and put some dust from the tabernacle floor into the water. After the priest has had the woman stand before the Lord, he shall loosen her hair, place in her hands the reminder offering, the grain offering for jealousy, while he himself holds the bitter water that brings a curse. Then the priest shall put the woman under oath and say to her, if no other man has slept with you, and you have not gone astray and become impure while married to your husband, may this bitter water that brings a curse not harm you. But if you've gone astray while married to your husband, and you have defiled yourself by sleeping with a man other than your husband, here the priest is to put the woman under the curse of the oath. May the Lord cause your people to curse and denounce you when he causes your thigh to waste away and your abdomen to swell. And may this water that brings a curse enter your body so that your abdomen swells and your thigh wastes away. And the woman is to say, Amen, so be it. The priest is to write these curses on a scroll and then wash them into the bitter water. Shall have the woman drink the bitter water that brings a curse, and this water will enter her and cause bitter suffering. The priest is to take from her hands the grain offering for jealousy, wave it before the Lord, and bring it to the altar. The priest is then to take a handful of the grain offering as a memorial offering and burn it on the altar. After that he is to have the woman drink the water. She has defiled herself and been unfaithful to her husband. Then when she is made to drink the water that brings a curse, it will go into her and cause bitter suffering. Her abdomen will swell, her thigh will waste away, and she will become accursed among her people. If, however, the woman has not defiled herself and is free from impurity, she will be clear of guilt and will be able to have children. It's interesting, the NIV, when it says her thigh may waste away, that also gets translated as her womb will fall out. So, I mean, it's it's an ancient form of a hysterectomy, which
What happens if he is unfaithful?
nothing,
Story. It's okay. It's okay.
none.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. There are lots of double standards.
You know, and here I just was reading before, and it says, you know, they have tons of wives. The husband can have tons of wives, but
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep.
so maybe the woman, or bring it back to this Old Testament.
Oh yes, they definitely, the Mormons do follow the Old Testament. That's part of it. What we find, of course, is usually having more than one wife just does not end well. Yeah, I was gonna say most guys I know, one's plenty. I certainly know one husband would be plenty. But yeah, it also raises a very interesting question. It's very, when we get into the abortion debate, Jews in particular look at this particular passage and see this as, well, if she's pregnant, what's going to happen? Plus, Jews through their Haggadah have an understanding that the soul does not enter the body until birth. So it's very interesting between Jews and Christians, the differing understandings and stances they'll take. If you ask a Jew, about 80% of Jews will say that they have no problem with abortion and think that it's actually even outlined in the Bible. So if she was pregnant, it would abort it. Yep.
Does it say anywhere what these bitter things were?
I think one of the big things was copper. At least some of the stuff I've read from some rabbis and stuff is they think it involved a lot of copper and things like that, which you don't really want to. Yeah, exactly. Then you get the Nazarites. Of course, the Nazarites are the ones that can't cut their hair, they can't drink alcohol, and they can't touch anything that's unclean. Samson's a Nazarite. John the Baptist is a Nazarite. So chapter 6 kind of gives you the outline of what a Nazarite is and what they're like. When we get to chapter 9, get to the Passover, of course. This is where they lay out essentially here's what you need to do during the Passover celebration. It isn't fully laid out. You have to go to Jewish Haggadah to get the actual, all the stuff that they do. But the cloud over the tabernacle, this was always kind of how you knew God was around in verse 15, chapter 9, verse 15. On the day the tabernacle, the tent of the testimony, was set up, the cloud covered it. From evening till morning, the cloud above the tabernacle looked like fire. That is how it continued to be. The cloud covered it, and at night it looked like fire. Whenever the cloud lifted from above the tent, the Israelites set out. Wherever the cloud settled, the Israelites encamped. At the Lord's command, the Israelites set out, and at his command they encamped. As long as the cloud stayed over the tabernacle, they remained in camp. When the cloud remained over the tabernacle a long time, the Israelites obeyed the Lord's order and did not set out. Well, look at that. Israelites knowing how to obey orders for a change. The Lord's command, they would encamp, and then at his command, they would set out. Sometimes the cloud stayed only from evening until morning, and when it lifted in the morning, they set out, whether by day or by night. Wherever the cloud lifted, they set out. Whether the cloud stayed over the tabernacle for 2 days or a month or a year, the Israelites would remain. So you kind of get that idea of how God sort of, his presence was known among the people by this cloud. Chapter 10, they're finally ready to leave Mount Sinai. Kind of rise up, O Lord, where they get ready to take off. And things, like I said, up to this point have been pretty positive. You got the Israelites following orders. They're also still at Sinai. So, they really haven't moved on yet. Chapter 11 is where it starts to take a kind of negative turn. They start complaining. Now the people complained about their hardships in the hearing of the Lord, and when he heard them, his anger was aroused. Then fire from the Lord burned among them and consumed some of the outskirts of the camp. Careful there. The people cried out to Moses. He prayed to the Lord, and the fire died down. So that place was called Taberah, because the fire from the Lord had burned among them. The rabble within them began to crave other food. And again, they'd been getting manna. Who wants to eat manna all the time? If only we had meat to eat. We remember the fish we ate in Egypt at no cost. Also the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, the garlic. But now we have lost our appetite. We never see anything but this manna. Yeah, little bit of a fantasy again going on with the Israelites of what Egypt was actually like. I guarantee they weren't getting it for no cost, first of all, if they were getting it at all. But still, they still have that weird kind of fantasy of what it was like back in Egypt. And this conflict then that kind of starts to arise. Verse 10, Moses heard the people of every family wailing, each at the entrance to his tent, and the Lord became exceedingly angry, and Moses was troubled, and he asked the Lord, "Why have you brought us this trouble on your servant? What have I done to displease you that you put the burden of all these people on me?" It's like, what did I do to you, God? You're making me deal with these people. Did I conceive all these people? Did I give them birth? Why do you tell me to carry them in my arms as a nurse carries an infant to the land you promised an oath to their forefathers? Where can I get meat for all these people? They keep wailing to me, "Give us meat." I cannot carry all those people by myself. The burden is too heavy. If this is how you're going to treat me, put me to death right now. If I have found favor in your eyes, and do not let me face my own ruin. Well, the Lord said to Moses, "Bring me 70 of Israel's elders who are known to you as leaders and officials among the people. Have them come to the tent of meeting that they may stand there with you. I will come down and speak with you there, and I will take of the Spirit that is on you and put the Spirit on them. They will help you carry the burden of the people so that you will not have to carry it alone." So, hey, committee. Your first committee. Tell the people, consecrate yourselves in preparation for tomorrow when you will eat meat. And the Lord heard you when you wailed, if only we had meat, we were better off in Egypt. Now the Lord will give you meat, and you will eat it. I just got to be careful when God starts going, and you will eat it. I hear my parents sometimes when I read things like this. My mom, you're going to eat it and you're going to like it. That's right. No dessert for you. You will not eat it for just 1 day or 2 days or 5, 10 days or 10 or 20 days, but for a whole month until it comes out your nostrils and you loathe it. This is what my dad always said he was going to do to me if I ever wanted to try cigarettes. He said, yeah, he just said, you're going to keep smoking them. You're going to smoke a whole pack, and when you're done with that, you'll smoke another pack until you don't ever smoke again. So here's what God's doing, giving these quail till it comes out your nostrils because you've rejected the Lord who is among you and have wailed before him, saying, why did we ever leave Egypt? So here you have this conflict that really is something that becomes this conflict that calls their future into question. They're almost like it's refusing to go forward at this point. They've stopped, and God's like, how do I get these people moving again? Okay, give them the quail. So, of course, they do. They gorge on it. Some of them even die from it. It's kind of, here's the lesson. Be careful what you ask for. You might get it. And that really is one of the things God tends to do a lot, in especially the Old Testament, is he says, okay, this is how you want it. Fine, have it your way. Worst divine judgment ever is for God to say, fine, do it your way. We'll do this your way. And it never, ever goes well. Yeah. It's that disturbing consequence of when you get what you want, it can become your undoing. So they all get sick. They all kind of die. Well, not all of them, but a few of them die. Then we get to chapter 13. First back in chapter 12, you had Miriam and Aaron upset with Moses because he hadn't married a local girl, married a Cushite woman. So they kind of oppose him on that, and that doesn't go well. God's not real happy with Miriam and Aaron on that one. Yeah, she gets a little bit of leprosy and stuff, and yeah, little bit of leprosy, yeah. So she had to go away for several days and then come back. So in chapter 13, though, it's time to go explore. They got to go look at the land that God is giving them. The Lord said to Moses, send some men to explore the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the Israelites. From each ancestral tribe, send one of its leaders. So at the Lord's command, Moses sent them out from the desert of Paran, and all of them were leaders of the Israelites. So they go. Verse 21. So they went up and explored the land from the desert of Zin as far as Rehob towards Lebo Hamath. They went up through the Negev and came to Hebron, where Ahiman, Seshai, and Talmai, the descendants of Anak, lived. Hebron had been built 7 years before Zon in Egypt. When they reached the valley of Eshcol, they cut off a branch bearing a single cluster of grapes. 2 of them carried it on a pole between them, along with some pomegranates and figs. That place was called the Valley of Eshcol because of the cluster of grapes the Israelites cut up there. At the end of 40 days, they returned from exploring the land. And they came back to Moses and Aaron and the whole Israelite community at Kadesh in the desert of Paran. When they reported to them and the whole assembly and showed them the fruit of the land, they gave Moses this account. We went into the land to which you sent us, and it does flow with milk and honey. Here's its fruit. But the people who live here are powerful, and the cities are fortified and very large. We even saw descendants of Anak there. The Amalekites live in the Negev. The Hittites, Jebusites, and Amorites live in the hill country, and the Canaanites live near the sea along the Jordan. Then Caleb silenced the people before Moses and said, "We should go up and take possession of the land, for we can certainly do it. Yay, Caleb!" But the men who had gone up with him said, "Oh, we can't attack those people. They're stronger than we are." And they spread among the Israelites a bad report about the land they had explored. And they said, "The land we explored devours those living in it. All the people we saw are of great size. We saw the Nephilim there." This is a very interesting point. I'm going to stop there for a second. Does anybody know where the Nephilim show up earlier?
Yeah, when they propagated with the women on earth. Yeah, that's a
Before the flood. How are the Nephilim there after the flood? Interesting question. Just throwing it out there.
they were powerful giants from
Mm-hmm.
up above.
Yeah. Well, they were the progeny of the human women and the angels, or the sons of God, as it's called. We assume angels, though some believe that that just means maybe they were Sethites versus Cainites or something like that, But typically, based on like the Dead Sea Scrolls, you get the Book of Enoch and the Book of Giants. Talks about that. Of course, part of the punishment, according to those apocryphal books, is that the flood was sent to basically wipe out these abominations. So, but I just find it very interesting that the Nephilim are still there when everything was supposed to kind of have been destroyed in the flood. So, just there. I don't make a judgment on that. I just throw it out there as interesting. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them. So, you think the people are going to rally behind Caleb? Hey, there are giants in there, and they're going to eat you. So that night, all the people of the community raised their voices and wept aloud, and all the Israelites grumbled against Moses and Aaron, and the whole assembly said to them, "If only we had died in Egypt or in this desert. Why is the Lord bringing us to this land only to let us fall by the sword? Our wives and children will be taken as plunder. Wouldn't it be better for us to go back to Egypt?" And they said to each other, "We should choose a leader to go back to Egypt."
Wasn't Goliath probably one of the giants?
Well, he's a Philistine, so yeah, probably there's some connection. I mean, it's all they're in the general vicinity. So they decide they want to go back to Egypt. And those words really are a decisive rejection of God. Because God has said, "I will be with you. I've been with you this whole time. I'm saying go." And they're saying, "No, we want to go back to Egypt. We're done. We're going back." Moses, of course, tries to get them not to do this. Verse 9, "Do not rebel against the Lord. Do not be afraid of the people of the land, because we will swallow them up. Their protection is gone, but the Lord is with us. Don't be afraid." But the whole assembly talked about stoning them. And then the glory of the Lord appeared at the tent of meeting to all the Israelites. The Lord said to Moses, "How long will these people treat me with contempt? How long will they refuse to believe in me, in spite of all the miraculous signs I have performed among them? I will strike them down with a plague and destroy them, but I will make you into a nation greater and stronger than they." There's that idea again that he gets of, I'll get rid of all of them and I'll just build everything around you, Moses. And what does Moses say? Well, the Egyptians will hear about it. By your power you brought these people up from among them, and they will tell the inhabitants of this land about it. They have already heard about that you, O Lord, are with these people, and that you, O Lord, have been seen face to face, and your cloud stays over them, and that you go before them in a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. You put these people to death all at one time. The nations who have heard this report about you will say, "The Lord is not able to bring these people into the land he promised them on oath, so he slaughtered them in the desert." So may the Lord's strength so may the Lord's strength be displayed just as you have declared. The Lord is slow to anger, abounding in love, and forgiving sin and rebellion. Yet he does not leave the guilty unpunished. He punishes the children for the sins of the fathers to the third and fourth generation. In accordance with your great love, forgive the sin of these people, just as you have pardoned them from the time they left Egypt until now. The Lord replied, okay, I forgive them, as you asked. Nevertheless, as surely as I live, and as surely as the glory of the Lord fills the whole earth, not one of the men who saw my glory and the miraculous signs I performed in Egypt and in the desert, but who disobeyed me and tested me 10 times, not one of them, because God keeping count, not one of them will ever see the land I promised on oath to their forefathers. No one who has treated me with contempt will ever see it. But because my servant Caleb has a different spirit, follows me wholeheartedly, I will bring him into the land he went to, and his descendants will inherit. Since the Amalekites and Canaanites are living in the valleys, turn back tomorrow and set out toward the desert along the route to the Red Sea. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, how long will this wicked community grumble against me? I've heard the complaints of those grumbling Israelites, so tell them, as surely as I live, declares the Lord, I will do to you the very things I heard you say. In this desert, your bodies will fall. So here we go again. What did they say? It's better for us to die? Okay. Don't test God. Just don't throw those options out at him. He might do it.
Is this area there in basically the Sinai Peninsula?
Yes, they're in the wilderness of Zin right now. They're in this area. Moses eventually is going to die up in Mount Nebo. So for 40 years, they just kind of wander right around here. That's what they do. So only Joshua and Caleb are going to get a go in. And when Moses reported all this to them, they mourned bitterly. Early the next morning, they have a change of heart. They changed their mind. Early the next morning, they went up toward the high hill country. We have sinned, they said. We will go up to the place the Lord promised. But Moses said, why are you disobeying the Lord's command? This will not succeed. Do not go up, because the Lord is not with you. You will be defeated by your enemies. For the Amalekites and the Canaanites will face you there, because you have turned away from the Lord. He will not be with you, and you will fall by the sword. Nevertheless, in their presumption, they went up toward the high hill country, though neither Moses nor the ark of the Lord's covenant moved from the camp. Then the Amalekites and Canaanites who lived in that hill country came down and attacked them and beat them down all the way to Hormah. So, whoops. Again, we kind of see this, God is very capable of his outrage and his exasperation with these people. It kind of challenges us to see things kind of from God's perspective, of how he can just kind of really get exasperated with us from time to time, going, I do this, this, and this, and all you want is more, more, more. And, again, that whole have it your way thing just gets to die. So that pivotal moment, what they ask for, what they receive, they don't want to move forward. God says, fine, you don't have to. You've rejected the future that God has offered you, so you get the future you want, or you asked for. So then we have some problems when we get to chapter 20. This is where Moses screws up.
That was back in the end of chapter 15. That was a pretty harsh thing there when that person broke the Sabbath. They stoned.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of that kind of stuff. Yeah, they stone people a lot. Yeah. Well, that's because those are the laws, those are the rules. And, I think one of the things you have to do when you're reading a lot of this in the Old Testament there is tension. There is tension between a merciful, loving God and a God that has some very strict rules that are deadly if you break them. And I don't try to explain why, because I don't know why. Part of it, I think, has to do with, in general, the culture that they lived in was a harsh culture. And how does God work within something that's already that way? And for them, a lot of this stuff really was life or death. It was, you have to follow this covenant or things are not going to work out. And so I think at this juncture, God is kind of just being very, no, you need to do this, because if you're going to live in this land, this is how you need to be. God was very legalistic at that juncture, very much. If you're going to live, if you're going to do what I want you to do, you have to follow the rules. And they didn't like to do that. Of course, one of the things that's in the Ark of the Covenant is Aaron's staff. Chapter 17 gives us kind of why that is, the importance of that staff. Essentially, you've got some people who are trying to rebel, and they want new leadership. Chapter 17, the Lord said to Moses, "Speak to the Israelites and get 12 staffs from them, one from the leader in each of their ancestral tribes. Write the name of each man on his staff. On the staff of Levi, write Aaron's name, for there must be one staff for the head of each ancestral tribe. Place them in the tent of meeting in front of the testimony where I meet with you. The staff belonging to the man I choose will sprout, and I will rid myself of this constant grumbling against you by the Israelites." So Moses spoke to the Israelites and their leaders 12 staffs, and one for the leader of each of their ancestral tribes, and Aaron's staff was among them. Moses placed the staffs before the Lord in the tent of testimony. The next day Moses entered the tent of the testimony and saw that Aaron's staff, which represented the house of Levi, had not only sprouted, but had budded, blossomed, and produced almonds. There you go. Then Moses brought out all the other staffs from the Lord's presence to all the Israelites. They looked up at them, and each man took his own staff. And the Lord said to Moses, "Put back Aaron's staff in front of the testimony to be kept as a sign to the rebellious. This will put an end to their grumbling against me, so that they will not die." Moses did just as the Lord commanded. The Israelites said to Moses, "We will die. We are lost. We are all lost. Anyone who even comes near the tabernacle of the Lord will die. Are we all going to die?" Just goes on. We're going to stop there for tonight. But that staff is one of the things that winds up in the Ark of the Covenant, the staff that buds. And that was, that challenge to their authority, and God reaffirming, no, this is the leadership I have chosen. It's everything with them. It's not enough food, if they don't like the leadership, it's all of it. So stop there for tonight.